Committee of Six, a Project Transhuman short story. Written by J.S. Morin. Narrated by Michael Naramore. A pair of amber eyes blinked on, and 4 robots gasped. This was the 4th time Charlie 2 had witnessed an activation, and it would have given him goosebumps every time if he still had flesh. Of course, there was more confusion than wonderment for the newly awakened robot. Their last memories were all of lying down on a table in the Project Transhuman lab with a scanning rig strapped, glued, or taped to their head, depending on how recently they'd last been scanned and the generation of equipment in use at the time. The intervening months or years were just a blank, and the world had shifted out from under them. Kabir 2's first reaction was a startled invective in Hindi that Charlie 2 hadn't prepared an algorithm to translate.
Kabir, it's all right,
Holly 2 reassured the newcomer. All 5 of them were identical chassis, but each had fiddled with their voice emulators and donned clothing that made them able to tell one another apart.
It worked.
Kabir 2 sat up.
You can't be serious. Dr. Chang, if this is a prank...
There was a time and place, and Charlie 2 was having none of this nonsense. Open a file labeled Robotic Prototype User Manual.
How do I...
Kabir 2 delved once more into his native tongue, then turned to Charlie 2.
Dr. Truman, where is my body?
Jason 2 made a digital warble that approximated the clearing of a throat.
Well, you see,
Liquefied by an alien bioweapon, Charlie 2 cut in. We're putting together an elite team to retake Earth from the invaders. And since we only have brain scans from the project team, you're presently humanity's foremost military mind. While the Robotic Prototype User Manual didn't include explicit instructions on emoting, the crystalline brains each robot had routed autonomic responses to the appropriate facial actuators by default. Without knowing how to override being an open book, Kabir 2's eyes glowed brighter. He slipped off the upload rig and backed away from the others.
You're crazed. 2 years in the Air Force as an electrical systems specialist doesn't make me a soldier.
Charlie 2 nodded. Technically, it does.
I just did it for college tuition and to get my citizenship.
Maybe better grades and a little patience would have been a better plan, Charlie 2 told him with a clap on the shoulder. But hey, look at the bright side. Every human on Earth died, and you're getting a second chance. Kabir 2 raised his voice, but the next words weren't any that Charlie 2 understood. Jason 2 winced.
Oh, I looked that up once.
What'd he say? Charlie 2 asked. With Earth in shambles and the internet devolved into disjointed fragments of computers left unattended, Charlie 2 had neither the time nor inclination to research a language with only one speaker. Stepping out of the fray, Jason 2 put up his hands.
Ask him yourself.
Before Charlie 2 could do just that, Toby 2 stepped in.
Guys, stop. This is too important to bicker over. We have 1 chassis left. We need to decide who to activate. We have the technical bases covered,
Holly 2 declared. Jason 2 sized Toby 2 up and down, but addressed the team leader.
No offense, but it would have been nice to consult someone before awakening Toby with one of our only prototypes.
Hey, Charlie 2 snapped. Without Toby, we wouldn't have gotten the equipment out of Cambridge before the cloud hit. We rescanned ourselves. We're the only 2 who actually saw humanity end. And he's been with the project longer than any of you.
What's done is done,
Holly 2 declared, though it was a shabby effort at peacemaking.
I think, considering our entire species was just wiped out, we maybe ought to focus on the bigger picture.
Charlie 2 nodded. He'd been giving this some thought. We're 5 for 5 on successful uploads. I'm sure, given time, we'll be able to manufacture additional allies, but for our 6th team member, I say we shoot for the moon.
Oh, not this crap again,
Jason 2 whined. We should try the personality mixer. Holly 2 scoffed.
You're the only one who thinks that has any chance of working. I think it's viable,
Toby 2 chimed in. In a laboratory where even the receptionist had a PhD, albeit in sociology, Toby Green's name lacked those magical additional letters that lent weight to even asinine opinions. A fact that Holly 2 took no time in hammering home.
No one asked you.
His lab assistant was a grown-ass man before getting scanned and uploaded. If he wanted to fight this fight, fine. If he didn't, Charlie 2 was fine allowing him to get walked on. Think about it, Charlie 2 continued. You wanted Kabir over James McCovey because, and I'll concede the point, deer hunting is less directly applicable to a war against invasive aliens than maintaining airborne combat drones. But what if we could combine James with Fred and Eddie, come out with a guy ready to build the next generation of robotic chassis and a redneck wireless communications specialist comfortable with a shotgun?
No. We're more likely to brick our last viable brain,
Jason 2 replied, shaking his head.
Or worse, end up with a Norman Bates, who's comfortable toting a shotgun. I'd be fine grabbing Fred or Eddie. I think Janet's the way to go,
Holly 2 suggested.
Her work with Dale,
Kabir 2 stated, snapping out of a funk he'd fallen into, presumably to read his help file.
Excuse me?
Charlie 2 inquired. There's no grant money to be had.
If there's anything we want on Earth, we just walk up and take it.
There's no one to schmooze, no one to give interviews, no lunches, no lab tours, no government regulators. What the hell good is Dale?
Why not?
Kabir 2 asked, stepping forward into the center of attention.
Look at us. Where even are we? Some power station basement? A lab-made upload rig and a few metal bodies. That's all humanity has left according to the help file.
Charlie 2 had made the addendum after getting tired of re-explaining everything.
5 of us, 5 opinions, 5 directions. Say what you want about Dr. Chalmers,
like he's got about as much business calling himself doctor as Theodore Geisel.
But he kept the lab running and... Right. He did keep the lab running, didn't he?
Toby 2 nodded.
Right to the end.
And look at the result.
The newest robot spread his hands.
It worked.
I'm leading this effort, Charlie 2 countered. Everything Dale did, we don't need anymore.
He's a manager. He'll manage, and just because we needed him in a corner office on the phone rather than in the lab doesn't mean he didn't earn a place in the future he helped make. I say we take a vote.
The vote passed 3-1, and Toby's abstention on the grounds that no one wanted his opinion didn't end up mattering. They uploaded Dale 2. 6 robots, huddled around a camera feed that had been quantum encrypted, bounced through 12 nodes of a relay around the globe and broadcast wideband over all of North America. The drone bearing the camera was on full auto. There would be no tracing their end of the transmission because no signal was outbound from the bunker. In one corner of the screen, the drone continuously updated its location. Latitude 44.560924, longitude -63.536930. Software on the robot's end identified that combination of latitude and longitude as Halifax Harbor, off the coast of Nova Scotia. In the distance, they witnessed the construction of a massive hemispheric dome right at the water's edge, bridging land and ocean.
"Can you zoom in?"
Dale asked. They'd dropped the numeric designations as a convenience once the newest robot had pointed out that they were all a version 2. Charlie glowered. "No, it's an autonomous flight. Thank Holly that it's aimed at something useful."
"What about cleaning up the visual feed?"
Dale persisted. Kabir shook his head.
Sorry, sir. They're already using the best available settings.
We didn't exactly have time to develop custom equipment, Charlie snapped. All the military satellites that could read the alien serial numbers from orbit got swept out of the sky in the initial invasion.
Try another,
Dale suggested. Before Charlie could object that a little patience was called for given the circumstances, Toby had already switched the selector and brought up another drone feed. Desolate, abandoned coastline drifted past on the screen.
"This would look great in an Omni theater,"
Jason declared.
"It's making me want a bucket of popcorn the size of a beer keg and enough soda to cause bladder failure."
Well, since we can't eat anymore, how about you enjoy a nice electrical connection?
Holly countered in the tone of voice of a mother suggesting carrot sticks as a snack. Jason cast Charlie a dirty look.
Maybe someone should have thought about biological urges when it came to programming robotic brains.
Hey, I imaged our brains and copied them. If you're craving food, that's the fault of your brain, not my software. Just like to point out that tinkering with those vestigial brain functions is part of the personality mixing algorithm. Charlie wasn't going to let them forget that. Presently, their entire focus was on survival and threat assessment, but once they resumed manufacturing, he wanted mixed colleagues, not the same squabbling co-workers he'd been putting up with for years. On his own initiative, Toby switched feeds again. The resolution plummeted. From their stock of assorted long-range aerial surveillance salvage, this model was among the lowest capability. Luckily, the Suez Canal wasn't exactly a hotbed of nautical activity these days. The same wrecks run aground in the same spots, taking footage of the same lack of alien activity. It didn't take long before Toby changed drones once more. This time, the image was crisp and clear. However, the waters of the Baltic clouded their view as a submersible unit drifted along at minimum impeller speeds, barely overcoming the currents. Every robot leaned closer. Before their eyes, another dome neared completion. This time, the unit was fully underwater, set down on the ocean's floor. A swarm of workers busily continued the work. It was their first time catching the aliens in the act. No vehicles, no suits. This was their first view of their true enemy.
Tentacled cephalopods,
Holly spoke quietly, shaking her head. Toby wrung his hands.
"I feel like I'm to blame for writing Cthulhu fan fiction."
Dale dropped a heavy hand on the robot's shoulder.
You heard it, everyone. This is Tobias's fault.
That drew a few uneasy laughs. It was Jason who eventually broke the ensuing silence.
"We're pretty screwed. Just look at them all. There are only 6 of us, and we don't even have access to most of the planet's military hardware."
"That junk didn't do the biological humans any good,"
Holly reminded everyone. Kabir drew himself taller.
"Then why did you rake me up? Did you think they gave an airman second class the codes to NORAD?"
"Screw NORAD. Should have grabbed Nora,"
Jason countered.
"She might be a primate specialist, but she'd know how to analyze social behaviors or something, probably. Charlie, when was her scan from? Were you two on speaking terms, or was it during one of your breakups?" "We're not overriding anyone," Charlie answered emphatically, sidestepping the question of his affair with Dr. Nora Maxwell Granger entirely.
Not even for the good of all humanity? Dale asked.
Charlie would have dearly liked to factory reset the useless, pompous asshole, but he actually was earning his keep. Maybe his robotics experience was decades out of date, but he was organized, thorough, and just technical enough to save himself from Charlie's worst impulses. But it was Toby on the chopping block, and Charlie was having none of that. We're humans. End of story. We've got over 1,000 IQ points spread across 6 bodies. We've got access to all the Earth's computers, even if we have to manually travel to turn them on. We can figure this out. All of it. Alien behavior, their technology, their biology, their weapons, their weaknesses. Charlie enjoyed the fact that his diatribes no longer left him winded. We can do anything. Dale shook his head ruefully.
It's a wonderful sentiment, Charles. But how do you even begin such a monumental task?
With science. Time was on their side. Every human on Earth had already died. There was no one to save but themselves, and the robot's own safety relied more on stealth and circumspection rather than rash action. Charlie assembled a workforce of humanoid drones. Similar to the robot's chassis, these were more primitive, built for rugged labor rather than human mimicry. And they lacked brains. Basic processors kept them following programming that guided their every action. Rather than risk discovery traveling and working above ground, his drone army ant-farmed Europe and North America with tunnels. Jason tinkered up new surveillance hardware. The aliens started shooting down aerial camera drones, apparently for sport. But the aliens showed little ability to track signals or magnetic signatures. Through experimentation, Jason determined that they were aiming purely optically. Subsequent generations shrank, used camouflaging technology, and employed survival techniques that now extinct animal species had used successfully for millions of years. Insectile, aquatic, burrowing. Over the course of years, he found ways to get cameras and scientific measuring equipment closer and closer to the aliens and their colony domes. Jason also maintained the robot's chassis after normal wear and tear. Hawley coded new protocols for coordinating drone labor, more advanced encryption algorithms, and automated data analysis from the surveillance drones. Kabir repaired and automated old generators, focusing on solar and thorium, and ran power infrastructure to the new facilities deep underground. Dale ventured into the open, the riskiest of missions, keeping the various work sites in contact until they could reestablish a global hardline network. He also took a team of automatons and broke into military arsenals in search of weaponry. It was all far too primitive to fight back against the invasion force, but it was a start. As for Toby, the one robot no one else wanted activated had two roles. He kept everything other than the robots themselves in tip-top condition, overseeing the preventative maintenance and repairs of an ever-growing stockpile of technology and equipment. And he did anything Charlie asked of him, just as he had when humans were still roaming the earth, drinking lattes and listening to podcasts. Today, Charlie and Jason were collaborating on the manufacture of a new series of eel drones. The aliens might have eradicated every living eel on the planet, but that didn't mean the design wasn't pretty efficient for both swimming and concealing an array of interferometers and cameras. Holly had camped out nearby. Her role as chief programmer of the Robotic Resistance, as they'd begun calling themselves, allowed her to work from nearly anywhere, and her two chief clients were right here. Toby arrived, and it only took a quick covert signal to gather Kabir and Dale, as well to have a full meeting. Because what Toby gathered from the dead drop drones was worth them all being present for. The base's entertainment screen had been pillaged in pieces from a football stadium in Dallas. With decades on their hands and a task that felt all but endless, powering a megawatt LED jumbotron to watch old movies and the best of humanity's digitized television library seemed almost a tribute to the fallen genius of mankind rather than a juvenile waste of resources. On that screen, Toby presented the raw findings from the latest batch of drones he'd fished out of Earth's oceans. Jason's latest models didn't carry transmitters, both to save space and to avoid giving away their location. They needed periodic collection, download, and recharging before being sent back into the wilds for additional surveillance. Hawley's software converted that raw data into presentable findings faster than Toby could swap the physical media. "Wow," Charlie declared. "Look, more materials we can't identify."
"It's not the tech," Jason insisted. "We're getting molecular readings. It's not my fault 21st century material science didn't invent any of this stuff."
"Too bad we don't have Eddie around to figure it all out," He'd love a crack at these alien metals, Dale pointed out, staring at Toby all the while. Charlie knew that Toby was the weak link in the group, but he was also the most willing to take up all the grunt work the others tried to avoid. None of them got tired anymore, but the tedium of certain repetitive and mindless tasks risked spurring them to madness. Rather than engage, Charlie shifted the subject. "Weren't a few biological scans coming in today?" Toby jaunted over to his trailer of dripping wet swim drones.
Sure, 1 sec.
Once a few new downloads finished, another set of data appeared on the big screen.
Yikes,
Holly exclaimed.
Let me just verify that my algorithms haven't glitched out.
She zoned out, to all outward appearances comatose, as she focused inward on her internal calculations. After a few moments, the screen updated. Numbers shifted, but not in any meaningful way.
"Still yikes?" Charlie asked.
Still yikes,
Holly confirmed. They'd all been passing around the same white papers, journal publications, and authoritative texts relevant to the study of unknown life forms. Most of it had focused on previously undiscovered deep-sea creatures, and the methodology proved remarkably cross-applicable to the invaders. They thrived on greenhouse gases. While similar morphologically to octopuses, they had more rigid bodies and more dexterous appendages. They kept their environment around 15 degrees Celsius. A host of little drones had been sent out with beacons operating at various visible and near-visible wavelengths, establishing a visual acuity that exceeded human perception in the ultraviolet range. They could feel vibrations, but none of the test drones could determine anything like a sense of hearing among the invaders. But what had elicited that yikes from Holly was a conclusion drawn from the algorithms that they were nearly impervious to amounts of radiation that would have been lethal to humans in minutes.
So much for slowly irradiating them all to death,
Jason quipped. Charlie scoffed. They're starfarers. They'd never have gotten to Earth without some protection from radiation. If it was technological, they'd have had to learn how to detect it in order to shield their ships. This wasn't that big of a shock. Dale's response came as even less of a surprise.
"I think we need a meeting about this."
Meetings were Dale's thing. Letting him run one was like letting a kid lick the cake batter off the mixing beaters. Maybe it was a little irresponsible. Maybe someone else wanted to do it, but it made him happy, and he'd pitch a fit if he didn't get to. With a screen 10 times his height as a backdrop, displaying a montage of Earth's greatest hits ranging from spacewalks to Olympic opening ceremonies, Dale held court.
"I think we need to take a step back from our myriad individual tasks and look at the big picture."
As if they'd all had a tiny private chat network to which Dale hadn't been invited, the other 5 all turned their attention from Dale to the Jumbotron.
"I'm being serious here," Dale shouted.
The rest returned their attention his way. Charlie put his feet up on the slab of rock they were using as a conference table. "Come on, Dale, live a little. We didn't scan any comedians or actors. We've got to make our own fun."
"There's nothing fun about this entire situation."
While there was a certain stoic nobility in that sentiment, Charlie wasn't buying it. He wasn't in any pain. He could go anywhere he pleased, do anything he liked, live however he wanted. Doctors in the human era had given him so many death sentences that he'd grown numb to the invisible calendar crossing off the last days of his existence. If those aliens hadn't come, he'd either have been dead from regulatory overcaution or in this same robot body by now. And if 10 billion humans were around for that, he'd be having a lot less personal freedom. Charles Truman knew his species. So what if aliens were a constant threat? He'd lived with constant threats most of his life, with far less agency to do anything about it. "Go on, tell us about this big picture we're all missing." The Jumbotron shifted.
Dale must have either planned this ahead of time or been working on it as a background process as everyone squabbled. Earth. As of 2065, population 10.3 billion. Population today, either 0 or 6, depending whom you ask. The perpetrators of this decline, the alien squids. The screen showed Eradication Day footage scraped from computers across the globe. They murdered us all in a matter of weeks. They then disassembled their own interstellar vessels to construct 24 domed cities across Earth. There was no sign of any ship that arrived that has since departed Earth. That we've observed, Charlie pointed out. Dale nodded graciously. Granted. However, I believe the logical conclusion here is that this is merely a colonization effort. We didn't warrant an actual military incursion. We haven't seen any signs of militarization, just construction and farming of xenological flora within their environmental domes. In fact, other than the construction process itself, we've hardly seen them outside those domes. And we haven't found any way of breaking in, Jason pointed out. They seem pretty safe in there. We have, potentially, access to fusion weaponry.
Would they not be likely to take note of us moving large amounts of radioactive material?
Kabir suggested. Charlie doubted that, but he didn't like the idea anyway. He didn't get a chance to voice his objection. Unlikely. However, we've detected enough radioactive isotopes in the atmosphere that some nation must have launched a nuclear attack, and clearly to no avail. No? I think it's time to refocus our efforts on coexistence with the aliens. Charlie scrambled to his feet in outrage. They wiped out roughly 10.5 billion of us without so much as a hello. We can't possibly negotiate a roommate agreement with them. Who said anything about negotiations? Dale asked, and by the smarmy voice, Charlie realized he'd been lured into a rhetorical trap. We simply continue existing beneath their notice. We study them. We build our defenses, our escape routes, our lives. We build lives for ourselves and get on with them. Vengeance is forging a sword to fall on. Letting the aliens live rent-free on our planet is a recipe for doom. We either get rid of them or they get rid of us. We kill them as soon as we figure out how. They kill us the instant they realize we're a threat. Dale nodded along with Charlie's assessment. Makes one think that not posing any threat is the wiser choice. None of the others stepped in. This was Charlie and Dale's showdown. Just like back in Cambridge at Project Transhuman headquarters, back when they were the co-founders and chief rivals, vying for credit over humanity's greatest upcoming scientific breakthrough. Charlie didn't back down. No, it makes me think that we need a way to kill these monsters before they know it hits them. How? Tell me how, Charles. To all apparent evidence, they survived humanity's best shot, and we don't have anything better cooked up. Explain it in little words, so us simple-minded geniuses can understand. Dale was trying to take a victory lap when it was Charlie coming up behind him, already a lap ahead. I can explain my plan in one word. Krakatoa. One word, 10 years. It was nice being able to boil down a plan to use artificially induced supervolcanoes to obliterate domed alien cities from below to a single word. A single cataclysmic event, the 1883 eruption of the island of Krakatoa, surpassed any nuclear detonation in human history. But recreating a semblance of those conditions 24 times spread across the globe required more than mere pith. The 6 survivors of humanity possessed a total of 14 advanced degrees among them. Not a single one related to geology, volcanology, or earth sciences. They learned. Not a single one of the 6 had ever dug a hole deeper than a residential swimming pool. They practiced. None of them knew the first thing about deep shaft mining, explosives, or nuclear fusion, at least in practical terms. They studied. Experimental boring created seismic evidence that worried the committee in charge of recapturing Earth. By a 4-2 vote, they opted for traditional pick-and-shovel mining, albeit with robotic automatons. And all of their efforts took time. With the manual labor largely delegated to software and automatons, the robots themselves branched out. Dale gathered genetic samples of anything that hadn't been corrupted during the original purge. Genetics laboratories, embryonic cryonic facilities, veterinary test sites, any place that hermetically stored biological materials he plundered. Seed banks he let stand as is, continuing in their noble purpose that most of humanity had never suspected they'd need. Hawley continuously updated their communications protocols. On the off chance the aliens caught on that there was intelligent life left on Earth, they'd have been hard-pressed to decipher any transmissions, and Hawley sought to keep it that way. Toby read up on the maintenance of every damn vehicle and machine on Earth, or at least all the ones that might still be of use. Jason repurposed some old Japanese auto manufacturing plants into automaton assembly, and later to chassis fabrication. Running out of parts for one of the 6 thinking robots on Earth was an unacceptable circumstance. Kabir tinkered with energy weapons systems but gave up the work to focus on demolitions. Actually setting off large explosives was a risk none of them was willing to take, but Kabir broke into classified research facilities and leached off their advanced computer simulations. As for Charlie, he took up astronomy. While of less apparent usefulness than the other robots' hobbies, he wanted to watch the skies for signs that their cephalopod squatters were bringing friends. He discovered so much more. Not only were the alien colonists alone, they didn't appear to have left any remnants of ships in orbit. Even more interesting, once Charlie developed a telescope that could detect it, he was able to trace a residual radiation trail that hinted at the origin of this species who'd come to Earth uninvited. They were a long 10 years and filled with boredom and patience, but the end results were impressive. A warren of tunnels beneath each of the 24 alien domes, hundreds of kilometers in total, so deep that biological humans could never have survived at the lower levels. A new arrangement of nuclear explosive designed to focus a blast along an axis rather than expend all its energy equally in all directions. A network of monitoring stations. Reels of fiber optic cables kept everyone directly linked for communications. It was time to enact the greatest surprise attack in Earth's history. Each robot had been assigned 4 sites, roughly clustered geographically. As the time to the coordinated detonation ticked down, they were each responsible for ensuring that their 4 domes were ready for destruction. Diagnostics, simulations, remote camera visuals, radiation monitoring, seismic readings, power systems. Everything was monitored to death because it all needed to kill. It needed to work on the first try. It needed to be so swift and thorough and certain that the aliens would die before realizing they were under attack. All of them. Every last one. Eventually, the appointed day arrived. April 2nd, 2112. The 6 robots spread to their command centers, scattered around Earth, as close to any of their 4 assigned domes as practical. Charlie, assigned domes in Lake Michigan, the Gulf of Mexico, Nova Scotia, and the Bermuda Triangle, had recently finished a tour of his sites. They ran like clockwork. From his personal headquarters at the Project Transhuman offices in Cambridge, Massachusetts, he kept in touch with the project team. "All good here," Kabir reported. "I'm fine," Charlie reassured everyone. "Ready as we'll ever be, eh?" Dale joked lamely. "Mine are all set," Jason informed the group.
What about you, Holly? Toby?
There had been too long a pause. Charlie interceded.
We're under 30 minutes to Operation Krakatoa. The diversion's already out.
A swarm of aquatic surveillance drones had been sent to the Baltic Sea Dome. Based on everything they'd observed of alien behavior, a minor incursion like this would get all the aliens into security lockdown until they'd cleared a perimeter roughly a quarter-kilometer around all their colony sites. Anyone who'd wandered outside, whether for repairs or scouting, would flee to the safety of their nigh-indestructible colony domes. This was the largest threat the aliens would ever have seen from the robots. And if they didn't act to follow it up with the aliens' total annihilation, it was liable to provoke an unwelcome rise in the invaders' curiosity.
"Struggling with the relay," Holly reported. "Can't get one of my detonator arrays to reboot remotely."
"Then get in there and do it manually," Charlie shouted, though volume modulation on the transmission would steal the full impact of his ire before relaying it to Holly.
"I'd barely have time to get there before the explosives go off, let alone get back out."
Before Charlie could make the obvious argument, Dale stepped in to play the bad guy. "This is for the species. You have a duty to the mission first and foremost. Get in, fix it, and run like hell." A more subdued Toby called into the chat.
The Isle of Man site isn't responding to remote commands. I found that one of my technician automatons damaged a receiver that'll need replacement."
"Toby, you're going to have to—"
"Do you think I don't know that, Dr. Truman?"
Toby snapped.
"I'm staying. If this all works, just build another Toby someday, all right?"
"I will," Charlie promised. Even as a robot, Holly sounded frazzled.
"I'm outbound. ETA is Krakatoa -8. I'm going to make sure Singapore Dome goes down."
Time bled away. Charlie almost felt bad that his foresights had been properly maintained and monitored. Toby was great at fixing stuff, but he often lacked the foresight to keep them from failing in the first place. Holly was out of her element working with physical systems. The two other actual roboticists and the electrical engineer all managed just fine, even if one of them was Dale Chalmers. Operation Krakatoa approached. Charlie had rummaged up some champagne bottles. Even if he lacked the biology necessary to drink the stuff, shaking one up and popping the cork had felt like an appropriate celebration. An array of camera feeds showed aquatic, shoreline, and terrestrial domes spread all over Earth. 24 screens. 24 domes. A clock scavenged from a basketball arena counted down the time. It struck zeros. Each screen displayed some manner of glitch. Some feeds failed, others jarred and jolted. Above ground, clouds of smoke and ash blocked out all view. A borrowed seismograph shook with the impact, but Charlie hadn't set it up right to get proper readings. Charlie had lost contact with all his sites, 4 for 4. Not that he doubted his end of the project. His sense of satisfaction had no biological component, but if he'd still been capable, he'd like to think he'd have wept. "We did it!" Dale cheered.
"Sir, we did!"
Kabir agreed.
"Holly? Toby?"
Jason asked over the chat protocol Holly had written from scratch. "They did their job," was all Charlie could think to say after a prolonged silence.
"What now?"
Kabir asked. Charlie studied the shrink-wrapped pallet stacked with champagne. He'd lost a friend, maybe his only friend. And Holly, too, he supposed. It just didn't feel right to pop corks and spray suds around the office. First things first, we come out of hiding and conduct a complete survey of all 24 sites. If those eruptions didn't kill them all, I'm at a loss. But assuming we killed them all, There's only one thing left to do. Start rebuilding Earth. Thanks for listening to this Project Transhuman story. Don't worry, Eve 14 and Charlie 7 aren't done yet. To continue listening, search Project Transhuman at your favorite audiobook store, or visit projecttranshuman.com. This has been Committee of Six, a Project Transhuman short story. Written by J.S. Morin. Narrated by Michael Naramore. Copyright 2025 by J.S. Morin. Production copyright 2025 by J.S. Morin.